Good evening, and welcome to the grand premiere of the Negro Leaguers in Puerto Rico. Good evening. My name is Adam Darowski. I am the Director of Product for Sports Reference, and I'm joined by Jorge Colón Delgado, the official historian of the Puerto Rican Baseball League. Hello, Jorge.
Hi, Adam. Very
Well,
happy to be with you here in this new project.
I'm very excited as well. Today, we're beginning a new webinar series about Negro League baseball players in Puerto Rico. So first, a little bit of background. Baseball came to Puerto Rico via a Puerto Rican raised in the U.S. named Amos Iglesias Van Pelt and local Cubans. The first official game was played in 1898. And that was the beginning of a rich history of the sport on the island. The Puerto Rican Professional Baseball League began in 1938. 16 of the 37 Negro League Hall of Famers played on the island. This list includes many of the stars that you're familiar with, like Satchel Paige, Josh Gibson, Willard Brown, Oscar Charleston, many others. And at least 4 other players played on the island before 1938. That's Jose Mendez, Cristobal Torriente, Luis Santop, Martin Dihigo, who was born on this date today. Yep. More Negro League Hall of Famers played in Puerto Rico than in any other country in the Caribbean. And we're going to talk about them. So before we jump in, I want to say that if you want to add some comments on Facebook or YouTube, we can certainly get to them at the end of the program. But without further ado, I would like Jorge to tell us a little bit more about this project. So how did the Negro Leaguers in Puerto Rico project get started?
Well, it started 2 years ago, but I had this, I went to some reunions and conference about Negro Leaguers, and I noticed that they talk about, for example, Josh Gibson. Josh Gibson was a huge star in Mexico and Cuba, and then they didn't mention Puerto Rico. And it happened with Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson went to Venezuela, but Jackie Robinson came to Puerto Rico with the Brooklyn Dodgers, and also he was signed to manage Mayagüez baseball team. So that it bothered me a little bit, but I knew that it was our fault. And when I say our fault, Puerto Rican writers, because we write only in Spanish. So we need to write in English, and we need to do programs in English like this one. In 2006, I bought the Riley Encyclopedia, and I began to look for the Puerto Ricans in the Riley Encyclopedia and the ball players that saw action in the La Liga de Béisbol Profesional de Puerto Rico. And 2006, I said, I'm going to do a book about Negro Leaguers in Puerto Rico. But what happens is that after 2006, I got a lot of contracts to write books, and I left Negro Leaguers behind. But then in 2020, December 16, Negro Leagues were declared major leagues, 7 organized leagues. And I say, this is the moment. This is the moment. I'm going to do a web page. And I called my friend Javier Castellano, and I said, Javier Castellano is a webmaster, and he did my page, my other page, Baseball 101 in Spanish. That Baseball 101 has all the records of the Liga de Béisbol Profesional de Puerto Rico Professional Baseball League digitalized. And I said to Javier, I want a page more or less like Baseball 101. And we need to have it for February 13th, 2021, because that was the centennial of the Negro Leagues. And we worked together, and we had it. We launched the webpage, Negro Leaguers in Puerto Rico. And people began to notice a little bit, slowly but steady, baseball in Puerto Rico. And I received invitations for interviews and for presentations. I did my first one last February, Casa Teatro in Memphis, Tennessee. Then in April, I have got an invitation from the Joshua Gibson Foundation to talk about Josh Gibson in Puerto Rico. So then I got another invitation to be part of a 42 for 21 committee. So, things are going slowly but steady. I'm very happy for that, but there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I think what's really important about this work is that obviously there's a groundswell of research happening around the Negro Leagues right now, and this data and these stories about their time in Puerto Rico is a missing piece of that. So I think it's very important, and it's great that people are discovering it and discovering your website. For me personally, I found it just by trying to fill in the blanks of like where some of these stars were in the winter or during the seasons where we didn't have data. And I was finding these amazing statistics for players like Titela Vargas and even Josh Gibson and so many. So what was your goal of the website when you created it?
Well, my goal is I have identified 217 players, Negro Leaguers, that's watching in the United States and in Puerto Rico. And I want to, I have completed 55 profiles, the records with photo, the biographic data, facts. And I'm going to put the most that I can from those 270 players. And we have a blog. My friend Thomas Beinheining. As a matter of fact, there are only 2 books written in English about Puerto Rico, and both of them were written by Thomas Beinheining. So imagine a history so huge and only 2 books in English and by the same person. So Thomas Beinheining is helping me in that page. I'm going to write in English too, and my goal is that in 2 years I'm going to have more than 100 profiles completed.
Excellent. That's a lot. And I can't wait to read more, because those profiles, not only do they have the statistics, they have the rankings and where they placed in the league, any triple crowns or streaks that they had. It's really interesting to read through all of those, because you get some players who did well in the Negro Leagues, but were stars in Puerto Rico. But you also have players that went the other way that maybe didn't do as well in Puerto Rico, but they were stars in the Negro League. So it's interesting to see who did what and where. So before we move on, I want to just kind of take a step back and ask you if you can explain the history of baseball in Puerto Rico a little bit. We touched on it earlier, but I know there's a much richer story about the start of baseball in Puerto Rico.
Yes, as you said, we started in 1898, but the founder was a young man by the name of Amos Iglesias Van Pelt, and he came to Puerto Rico in 1895, and he knew to play ball. He knew how to play baseball because he was from New York. His father was Puerto Rican. His mother was from New York, and then he came to Puerto Rico, and he didn't see no baseball activity. And one day he was in San Juan, walking by San Juan, and saw this big man with a bat, Braulio Sanchez, a Cuban. And he went to him and said, "Hey, you don't play here baseball in Puerto Rico, in San Juan?" He said, "Well, there are Cubans, local Cubans who know to play the game. They learned while studying in the United States." And then Amos Iglesias told Braulio, "Please, I would like to know them." And Braulio coordinate to a meeting with the Cubans and Amos Iglesias Van Pelt, and altogether they taught Puerto Ricans to play baseball. And they practiced 2 years, 1897, 1896, 1897. And in January 9th, 1898, the first game was held, the first official game, between Almendares and Borinquen. Almendares, the local Cubans, and Borinquen, the Puerto Ricans. It was rain out in the 3rd inning, but that was the beginning. And they play every Sunday. What happens is that the Spanish War, we're talking about 1898, January 9th, we were under Spanish flag. And February was the main explosion in La Habana, Cuba Bay, the ship of the United States, the USS Maine. And that began the Hispano-American or the Spanish-American War. And everything stopped in Puerto Rico including baseball. And after, we know that when the troops came to Puerto Rico, they played between them. We know that they play in San Juan, they play in Mayagüez, they play in where there were barracks, because they knew how to play the game since the Civil War. That was the major entertainment. Mm-hmm. And then the Puerto Rican, when United States has had total control of the island, and they established all those federal governments, federal offices, Treasury, Medical, U.S. Health Department, all those federal office. Then they did teams. They began to make up teams, and those departments plus the soldiers that were here, plus the ships that came to Puerto Rico, every ship had a team. And then the Puerto Ricans began to play against them and be part of those teams. And that's where really the Puerto Ricans polish their skills. And from that on, that was, we began to progress a lot. And the history of Puerto Rico in the major leagues.
Right. When did Negro League stars start coming over? You mentioned, we had mentioned at the beginning of the program that many came over before the start of the professional league. So how did that start to come about?
The first team that came was the Alex Pompey's Cuban Stars. That was the first team that came to Puerto Rico in 1916. Mm-hmm. And in those teams, that's what you mentioned, Jose de la Caridad Méndez and Cristobal Torriente. And very interesting, Jose de la Caridad Méndez stayed in Puerto Rico a few months, and he lived in San Juan, and he taught Puerto Rican kids to play baseball. Uh-huh. Yeah, and he lived in Calle San Justo Street in San Juan. And then he left, but he helped to develop, for the time he was in Puerto Rico, develop baseball in San Juan. And then from 1916, occasionally Negro Leagues team came, but it wasn't until 1931 that steadily, every winter, we had Negro Leagues teams and teams from Mexico, Dominican Republic, Venezuela, and Cuba. And that's what they call in Puerto Rico foreign league, Liga Extranjera. Mm-hmm. And there's where we got to see Martin Diego, Josh Gibson, Rap Dixon, and all those great players. And as a matter of fact, I thought that Joshua Gibson, the first team that he managed was Santurce in 1939. No, he managed Brooklyn Eagles in 1936.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So Josh Gibson had two managerial jobs in his career, and both were in Puerto Rico, Brooklyn Eagles and Santurce. So this in that period, 1931 to 1936, we got Concordia, Las Estrellas de Ramírez, Almendares, among New York Black Yankees, and among those teams played against local teams. And they played between October and February, mostly. And then in 1938, La Liga de Béisbol Profesional de Puerto Rico began. That we had an organized league with 6 teams.
Oh boy. And then in 1938, the floodgates just opened. So you were telling me the other day that there was a limit to how many Negro League players, or really any from off of the island, could play on one team. So can you tell me a little bit about the makeup of the teams in the professional league beginning in 1938?
Yeah, there were the 6 major cities: San Juan, Ponce, Mayagüez, Caguas, Guayama, and Humacao. And each one could contract 3 players from the outside. Only 3. And it was like that almost until the late 40s. That there were only 3 allowed, 3 players. The first year it was good, but then in the second year, Josh Gibson came to Puerto Rico, Satchel Paige came to Puerto Rico, Bill Perkins came to Puerto Rico. So there were there were better reinforcement, better players. In 1940, 41, Bob Leonard came to Puerto Rico, Buster Clarkson, and so the league came more competitive. What slowed it a little bit was the Second World War, because they didn't allow any players from the United States to come to Puerto Rico. So we have to merge. We merged because in 1939-40 we have an expansion of Santurce and Aguadilla. So we had 8 teams. We began with 6 teams in 1938. The next year, 2 additional teams, 8 teams. Then we had the league merge, and they didn't allow players from the United States. But when the Second World War finished, that was the golden era of Puerto Rico, the baseball. That's when so many players that came to Puerto Rico from 1946 to 1953, Negro Leaguers. So you have Willard Brown, Bob Thurman, Lucius Easter, Artie Wilson. You have Larry Doby. You had Monte Irving, Johnny Davis, Raymond Brown. Raymond Brown came in 1938, but you had Barney Brown. So many players that came in that era. And then although they didn't play too much in the Negro Leagues, but they came to Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, Sam Jones. So many. Junior Gilliam came to here. So many players, and that was the best era, the best period of our league was from 1946 to 1955. After that, as you know, Negro Leaguers began to get signed, and the quality, the competitiveness of the Negro Leagues began to decrease, because all the good Negro Leaguers were signed for the big league, and the Negro Leagues fans began to follow those Negro Leaguers in the big leagues, and later the Negro Leagues then disappeared. And the ones that came to Puerto Rico became old, and you can see there was a change in our league. It was not the same after they all those Negro Leaguers didn't come no more to Puerto Rico. There was a change in the league.
Right. You mentioned Bob Thurman before. I was just looking into him the other day, and I think he's a good example about like how the league complemented essentially the summer league that was available to the players at that time. So he played with the Homestead Grays in the Negro Leagues, and that during the winters he was playing in Puerto Rico, and he loved it. So then he decided during the summer he would start playing in the Dominican Republic, which that got him banned from organized baseball in the U.S. And eventually he finally was so good in the winters in Puerto Rico on a team that had I think he was in an outfield with Clemente and Mays. Is that true?
Yeah.
All in one outfield, just absolutely unbelievable.
And Clemente in left field, Willie Mays in center field, Bob Thurman in right field. But just when Bob Thurman was going to pitch, they put Luis Olmo from the Brooklyn Dodgers in right field. The 3 outfielders catch the ball basket: Clemente, Mays, and Olmo.
Unbelievable.
That was I don't think there's another team that had 3 basket catch outfielder as Santurce had in that season, with Clemente, Mays, and Olmo. And Bob Thurman, he was, what happens with Bob Thurman? It's like Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. That Babe Ruth, he was always in the shadow, Lou Gehrig of Babe Ruth. Bob Thurman was always in the shadow of Willard Brown, but he was a great player. He was fast. He played right field. He was a great pitcher. 39 games won. So he was one of the best players to come to Puerto Rico, and he's the all-time leader in home runs with 120 and RBIs 566. And he loved Puerto Rico, and we love Bob Thurman.
Yeah, and he did so well that the Cincinnati Reds finally came calling, and what was he, 36 years old or something, and he got his start in the National League that late. Just an unbelievable story.
Yeah, and he did good with Cincinnati, although he was old. He did very good with Cincinnati. And these players, now that you mention Bob Thurman, all these Negro leaguers that came to the big leagues, after Jackie Robinson came to the big leagues, and then came Larry Doby and all those Negro leaguers, they began to take the awards, you know,
Absolutely. All of them. Yeah.
MVP. Yeah, it changed, and before it was. With all due respect, we can say it was Ted Williams, it was Stan Musial. Now they had to share with all these Negro leaguers that were, great players, and they were so eager to prove that they were as good as them, as good as the white players. And it's a shame that because the color of the skin, they couldn't play before, really, and they couldn't live a better life for them and for their family.
Yeah. I finally did some research. This was a few months ago. I was trying to figure out exactly what the impact of integration was. So the Negro major leagues were around for 29 years. That's 1920 to 1948.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked at the 29 years after that. So it was beginning in 1949. And I took the top 40 players, the top 40 hitters by wins above replacement, WAR.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided to look at which ones would not have been allowed to play in the previous 29 years. And it was over half of them. So that illustrated to me exactly how much, what we mean by it was a major league, that it was literally just as good. Like you're like literally split the league in half. Now there were fewer players, but when we're looking at the top heavy talent, that we were missing out a lot of players before 1948.
Yes, yes, and so I think a lot. What will happen if all those players will have played in the big leagues? And I know I'm for sure that the history will be different,
Mm-hmm.
very differently. And one player that I think a lot is Josh Gibson. Josh Gibson won the Triple Crown twice and in a row.
Mm-hmm.
And you imagine Josh Gibson playing right field as Babe Ruth? What numbers he had?
Oh yeah.
Because all those numbers, Josh Gibson was always the first in batting, homers, RBIs, and he was a catcher. That's the most challenging position, and he batted like like an outfielder. He was a great player, and I don't like to say that he was the Black Babe Ruth. No, he was Josh Gibson. Babe
Right.
Ruth was Babe Ruth.
Right. So we touched on some statistics earlier. I'm a big statistics guy. Your website has a lot of them. So I was curious if you could tell me a little bit about where those stats came from and how complete they are. And do we have full records of the Puerto Rican League?
Well, I have all the records for the Puerto Rican League from 1938 to the present. But they are different sources. For example, every time in the newspapers, the day after the last day of the season, they put the final statistics.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a copy of the final statistics from 1967 to now to the present. They are official statistics. You can of the league, but before I haven't found a book, a report officially from the league. But I have the statistics from the newspapers, and those statistics are the ones that have been used forever.
Mm-hmm.
But I have, since 1938, I have all of those stats. I remember just a little story when Hurricane Maria came. I have them in a plastic box, and water came to where I live. And after I left my family in the home, besides me, the second floor, I came back, took the took the box, and gave it. Say, you put this box in the top of the house because this cannot be. That's all the records are there. And I remember that my wife said, "Where are you going?" I have to go back. I cannot, I have all the statistics in that box. So I save them. And for me, that's very important.
And I'm so glad that you did, because you're preserving history there, and now I'm so excited to see what you're going to do with it. I'm happy to help out however I can, and yeah, very exciting. So one question that I had too was, well, I guess first, can you tell us about the webinar series? How often will they be, and what can we expect from them?
Okay, the webinar series is going to be once a month. It's going to be a presentation in PowerPoint, and we are going to, you and me are going to be talking about over the slides. Let's say for the example, the first one is going to be "They Were Our Heroes Too." There, we're gonna present the history of the Negro Leagues in Puerto Rico, and from that on, then we can talk so many things. One of the first one is Jackie Robinson in Puerto Rico. Then we have a presentation of Francisco Pancho Coimbre with author Raúl Ramos, who wrote the book of Pancho, the latest book of Pancho Coimbre, so people can know more about Pancho Coimbre and Wheeler Brown. And when Raymond Brown defeated the New York Yankees, Luis Marquez, the first black player signed by the Yankees. So many players, so many things that we're going to do monthly. And hope these people in the United States get a good knowledge about what happened in Puerto Rico and the importance of Puerto Rico in baseball, not only in the big leagues, but Negro Leagues. And it goes, Negro Leaguers enrich our sport, our baseball, and we gave work, a job, a normal job. Those players came to Puerto Rico and they stay wherever. They could walk with whoever they wanted, eat wherever they wanted, no segregation. And Adam, sometimes I think that, imagine you and I are Negro Leaguers playing in Puerto Rico, and today is the last day of the season, and we have to return to the United States tomorrow. That should be very tough that night. I don't think they could sleep, because here in Puerto Rico, they treat me like a human being. Now I'm going to fight against Jim Crow and all those segregation laws. That should be, that had to be very, very tough for those players.
Well, there's players like Wild Bill Wright, who, when playing in Mexico, that he felt the same way, like he was accepted, and he just decided not to go back. Were there any players that stayed in Puerto Rico in a similar way?
No, after they retired. For example, Dixie, second base, after he retired, he stayed in Puerto Rico and he worked with Pedrin Zorrilla in the gas station that Pedrin had in Santurce. But a few of them, but after they retired, they always return because that was their living. And they play here in the winter, went to the Negro Leagues, but I imagine eager to go to next winter to come to Puerto Rico. And they came, 10 years, 9 years, 11 years. They made their lives here. And Satchel Paige even got married in Puerto Rico.
Didn't he get married a lot of places? I don't know.
Yeah. That's a problem that we're going to talk about that. And they tell me that he has a son, a Puerto Rican son. His name is
really?
Julio Paige. He lives in the United States. And I have other people in Guayama. When Julio Paige goes to Guayama, I'm going to be there to interview him. But yes, Satchel Paige was married here in Puerto Rico with Lucy Figueroa, a Puerto Rican lady from Guayama, and they had a Julio Paige. So that's another great history.
Another great story, yes.
Yeah, another great story.
Here's a question. Why me? Why am I here?
Why you are here? Well, I saw you in first of all, we follow each other in Twitter, okay? But I saw you in a program with Larry Lester, Adrian Burgos, Gary Asheville, and a gentleman from the Negro Leagues Museum.
Raymond Oswell, yes.
Yes. And I saw the way you had that program. You know, you have four very bright people, and you manage very well. And I say, I think that person can help me. But I was a little bit, I said, well, I'm going to write to him. But that was later. And I remember when I decided to do the program, I wrote to you, I have the message, and you answered in 20 minutes. Very interested. I was surprised because you didn't know me. And I was very happy as well. Is he is in, that means that this is good, what I want. And here we are, you and me, in Negro Leagues in Puerto Rico, but I appreciate a lot, and I'm very happy to have you with me in this project. And always will appreciate and be thankful for you being with me, accepting immediately to work with me.
Oh, I'm thrilled to do it. I was honored when you asked me to do it because the webinar that you saw, that was the first webinar I've done. So I'm glad you thought that it went well. But I'm very happy to have this opportunity to not only allow you to do this program, but to learn from you because I don't know much about Puerto Rican baseball at all. So I'm very excited to learn about it. But there's all these names that I know who played over there. So now I get to have a more complete history of these players in my brain. And I'm very appreciative of that.
Sure. I'm very glad and looking forward to all this webinar series.
Excellent. Well, the next one will be on Wednesday, June 15th, called They Were Our Heroes 2. So I want to tell people how they can follow along with.
Yes. Let me put the promo here.
Okay.
And explain the photo.
Excellent. Yes.
Stories that need to be told. They were our heroes too. There you see Wheeler Brown receiving a kiss. That photo was taken at the governor's mansion, La Fortaleza. Imagine Wheeler Brown was invited to the governor's mansion, and he was, he knew Governor Luis Muñoz Marin. And Governor Luis Muñoz Marin, every time there was an all-star game, he gave a dinner for all those who were selected. And Wheeler Brown was always selected. So there you see, he had a lot of fans. And that's our first webinar. That's going to be June 15 at 8 o'clock. And here we have where you can follow us. This is the YouTube channel, Negro Leaguers in Puerto Rico. Twitter, Negro Leaguers PR. And this is the page, Negro Leaguers Puerto Rico, the web page. So you can see all the records and all the things that we are doing, the investigations. And there's a very important part in that web page, because I have the Puerto Ricans. We have box scores of the Puerto Ricans who play in the organized leagues, but there are few of them that we don't have. So do not consider them big leaguers. There are about 5 or 6. But Gary Ashwell, in 2016, he made an article about, he wrote to me, hey, do you know Jose Torres? And I said, yes, I know him. He played here in Puerto Rico with Humacao. Do you have a photo of him? Yes. And I sent him the photo, and he published an article about Jose Torres and box score. That box score that he published in 2016 was what made or approved Jose Torres as a big leaguer.
That's amazing.
Yes, and that's when I knew or met Gary Ashwell, and that's a very important part, because in that era there were no news reporters from Puerto Rico to go to cover Negro Leagues. And what happens is that the old Negro Leagues, the Puerto Rican Negro Leagues, they wrote weekly a letter. Okay, we did this. This guy had this, batted something. They made a report, and that is what they publish in the newspaper with no box score. So if it doesn't appear box score, we cannot consider them. They are Negro Leaguers, but not big leaguers.
Right.
And that's a very important investigation that I am doing, and you can find it in Negro Leaguers in Puerto Rico.com. And the other, okay, I told you that. Yes, those are the where you can follow us. Those are the places that you can follow this project.
Excellent. So last call if we had any questions on Facebook or YouTube, but if not, we'll be wrapping up shortly. I'm really looking forward to the episode on June 15th. I can't wait to learn more, see what all that's about. We showed that photo of Willard Brown there, and make sure you go to NegroLeaguersPuertoRico.com where you can see that Willard Brown hit 350 in Puerto Rico with 2 Triple Crowns and over 100 home runs and less than 2,000 at bats. It's just amazing to have that additional information that we can add to his career resume. It's amazing.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm happy about, when they did the Hall of Fame plaque, they included Puerto Rico.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, they included 2 Triple Crowns. I gave them the information. I gave the information to my friend Jeff Idelson. I said, Jeff, this guy was terrific in Puerto Rico. And I met Willard Brown's daughter. She was there. And we were waiting. You know, they unveiled the plaque about 6 o'clock the day that they do the induction. And we thought that they made the plaque with the Santurce cap.
Oh.
And we were waiting, you know, but they did it with the Kansas City. But in the magazine, Annuary, Willard Brown appears with the Santurce uniform. And another fact is that Leon Day is the only player in the Hall of Fame with a Puerto Rican cap, Aguadilla.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
Yeah.
Excellent.
There are many things. You're going to like it.
Oh, I'm going to. I know it. Jorge, thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to doing this again.
Thank you, Edmund. Thanks all people that have connected are joining us today. And looking forward to June 15th. Until then, thank you.
Thank you very much for viewing.